So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
I'm trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with me, Tamarijuana. Well, we got some snow piling up down here in these Kootenays again. I went out and shoveled this morning and, busted up my knee yesterday falling on the ice, and now it's snowing again. So it looks like I'll be out shoveling some more bloody snow. I can't complain, really, because we haven't had as much snow this year as we had last year, but it's still, winter, I guess, in Canada. And what can you expect? Some good news this morning, though, that I did hear is that Canada Post is going to keep going door-to-door delivery. If you don't already have postal service, though, you still have to go to your mailboxes. But anybody else that's got postal service, house to house, will still remain getting that service. So that's good news for patients out there that are actually ordering from their licensed producer. They're getting it through the mail or dispensary or however you're getting it. If you're using Canada Post, you're not going to lose that service. So this morning I have longtime activist. I don't even know how to introduce her because there's so much to introduce her. She's a former editor of Skunk magazine. She fought and advocates for patients. She fought for her own self. She fought with Alberta Health Services. She fought to get her son back. This morning, I'd like to welcome Lisa Kirkman to the show. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. How you do?
Oh, snow.
Snow. Oh, snow. Well, it's funny. I'm freezing my butt off. I'm up here in Calgary, and it's been particularly nice winter. I really can't complain. It has not been that cold or that much snow at all, and it's. Calgary, it could be 40 below, but it's sunny.
That's
it's
great.
Like the opposite of Vancouver, where it'll be warm all winter, but it's, you don't see the sun for 4 months.
Yeah.
But
it's like it is here.
It's cold this morning. It's like I'm huddled in bed. Like I said, I got the chihuahuas under my covers with me.
Well, Cranbrook's actually the sunshine capital of Canada, but I'm willing to dispute that right now because we haven't had much sun through the winter. Like last year we had lots of snow, but we also had plenty of blue sky and sunshine. This year it's been pretty standardly gray and more Vancouver weather, like more rainy, kind of freezy rain. Right now we're getting piled on.
I have a hard time keeping warm in that. It's like I think at least here it's dry, and so I know I got to do it's a dry cold thing, but it's true because having lived on the coast, I lived on the coast for quite a long time, and the thing is, it won't be as cold there, but the humid cold that comes off the water freezes you, like goes through whatever you're wearing, and it feels so much colder to me here. At least it might be 20 below, but if you kind of layer and do that kind of thing, then you're pretty good. It's not too bad, but today I don't know, I don't know if it's more humid or something, but it just feels colder.
Well, on that note, we'll go back to how you got started, because you got started working out on the coast because you wrote an article and you won an article writing for Cannabis Culture magazine. So that's how you kind of got started in the cannabis industry, or?
Yeah, not exactly that. No, I didn't get an article in, actually. The way it went down was I literally I subscribed to CC. And they had a contest. Originally, the contest was to win their first Cannabis Culture Cup, to win tickets to that. That was like early on in the year. and something got screwed up. It was like somebody who hadn't subscribed or something won, or I don't know. She was in Newfoundland. They didn't want to pay for her. I have no idea. But anyways, I have a feeling that was part of it. But anyways, I won this contest to go to a this big like pot food buffet, pot extravaganza at Mark Emery's house. This is when Mark was living out on the Sunshine Coast, and pretty much it was weird. It was like everybody was living on the Sunshine Coast, and people were moving from all over the world, really. Activists from all over were, especially in the U.S., they were coming up and moving there. And I went out and I kind of hit it off really well with everybody, and then just sort of kept in touch. And then eventually they were looking for an assistant editor for Dana Larson, who was the editor-in-chief at the time. He was editor for 10 years. Where Mark was the publisher. And and so I have a background in writing. And so I said, hey, why not? And they said, hey, why not? And so I was hired and brought out there in November of 2000. And the rest is kind of history. And so I worked through there, and then through that, and after starting the Sunshine Coast Compassion Club Society, which is one of the first few dispensaries in Canada. I got more work through other cannabis magazines and sort of just became known for that. And that's how I ended up at Skunk, and the rest is a hazy history.
Well, that's the thing.
I wasn't over an article. I wrote an article after that, and then I actually started writing. But I kind of just won a contest to go to this thing. But you know me, I'm my winning personality. Whatever. I convinced them.
You just worked yourself right in there, right?
Maybe I dropped something in their drinks. I don't know. They were all pretty high already. So that's how I started out there. Yeah.
And then you actually went on to running a compassion club on the Sunshine Coast too, right? You ran a dispensary.
Yeah. Well, what happened was at the time on the West Coast anyway, there was I believe it was like Calm, or there was or TCC. There was a couple of dispensaries in out east, but it was the BCCS in Vancouver, and then there was VIX, and then there was CBFC. There was the Canadian Cannabis Buyers Club, or Canada, you know how that is, out in Victoria. And the problem was, living on the Sunshine Coast, there's amazing medicine being grown out there, incredible cannabis, lots of breeders, lots of great strains, lots of great growers, but it was all being shipped out to the dispensaries elsewhere. The MMAR had just started in 2001, so it was just after I moved out there, really. Not that really changed much. It changed a little bit, because that meant that we had some legal growers at that point. But what was happening is that there was like a 4-month waiting list for the BCCS just for their intake. You know, that's how desperately it was needed. And now you can't walk down the street in Vancouver without tripping over a dispensary. But at the time, that was it. And it seems crazy to me that so many people on the Sunshine Coast were waiting that long and having to take a ferry all the way to Vancouver, where they were already sick, just to get the access to the cannabis that was being grown by their next door neighbor on the Sunshine Coast. And so I got together with a few activists out there, Dana Larson, Michelle Rainey, and Mark Emery were involved at the time. In fact, Mark gave me a little seed money to get going, literally seed money. And basically I just got it started from there as a nonprofit organization, and we became like a little hub, a little community hub on the Sunshine Coast, because there really weren't. This whole dispensary thing was very underground. at the time. And there just weren't many out there. I mean, we had stories in the Miami Herald, which was weird to me, but it really underlined how important it was to be able to get this medicine to people, and how the Sunshine Coast has a lot of retirees, a lot of older people out there. So it was surprising to me that, actually it wasn't totally surprising. At first it was surprising that so many of our members were older, quite a bit older. But then the younger kids usually had access to weed otherwise. But we also became sort of a community center as well, and a center for activism. And it was a pretty good thing. We also became the very first, I can say this, the very first dispensary, or we're technically the first mom in Canada, because the other dispensaries would mail out to you maybe, but they kept it very on the DL. They didn't really share that information with anybody until you were actually a member, and then they might mail it out to you. But I said, what the hey, why not? And I got ads in the paper, in the yellow pages on the Sunshine Coast there. Do you need medical marijuana? And also on that, you remember that channel that we had that you go to tell you what's on TV? The TV Guide channel that you had to wait, like a half an hour before it came around again to see what's on. Anyway, well, I remember those were the days. We bought advertising there.
Right.
You need medical marijuana, mail order, and we slowly built up our clientele till we had, the membership, I should say, till we had quite a few members, actually. I think at one point we actually might have had more of a membership outside of the Sunshine Coast that were mail order than weren't. Because the way that we checked things back then is you send something in and we faxed your doctor. And we got a fax back and forth. So I figured if I can fax somebody across town, I can fax somebody across the country. It doesn't really make a difference. And so we were pretty much the first ones to openly do mail order. So I like to say, and that's where Mama Kind comes from too. I was Mama Kind too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too with mail order. It's really important because of the fact that there was so little access back, when you got started, that people could actually gain access. Because let's face it, the stuff that you were getting from Health Canada back in the original days of when they were supplying was horrible.
PPL was like horrible. What they used to do back then, it was hamburger basically, and it was cheapo hamburger too, because it was. What they would do is the government would say, okay, we have, aside from the fact that it was being grown in a mine, which just wasn't a healthy environment, even prairie plant systems themselves, this is in Flin Flon, Manitoba, they said that this isn't exactly ideal. But what would happen is that you really didn't know what you would get. The government themselves would get RCMP mix, is what it was called. And usually most of the seeds were actually probably from emery seeds. But what would happen is you get busted when a seed company would get busted. RCMP is coming. All the seeds that you've been sorting on your table all go boom, all into one big bag, and they get all mixed up. And that's what it was called, RCMP mix. And so they wouldn't know what they would be getting. The RCMP didn't know what they were getting. They just all mixed it all up into one big thing and handed it over to Prairie Plant Systems and said, okay, we want you to grow one strain really, and it can't have more than, I think it was like 6% THC. It was just like ridiculously low. I don't even think they included CBD or any other cannabinoids in their count. They were just worried about the THC. Don't make it too strong. Heaven forbid. You have to use less of it, right? And so what they would do is they would take all of this weed and chop it up, like the stems, the leaves, and everything. They would chop it up. They would test it, like you had a big pile of it, and we taste a little bit here and a little bit there, and they go, oh, the THC level is too high. And so they would add more seeds and stems, right, and chopped up stems and leaves or whatever, right, which would bring the average THC down to where they needed it, or they take a little bit of out if they needed it higher, whatever. And so it was just so bad. It looked like that fake weed that you could order.
The synthetic. Well, it's kind of like what they want to do with the oil now too, right? Like they want to, cap the oil at 3% THC, and then all that's going to do is be cut down. So you have so much garbage in the extract.
They're going to cut it down with garbage. But aside from, but why? It's the other way around. If you want people to use less of something, make it stronger.
Right.
Like it's not the, otherwise you're having people like me, like you, people who require high amounts of cannabinoids are going to just have to use so much of it. I have a ridiculously large license because for various reasons, for various health issues. But if I could only get part of the reason why it's so high is because if you're counting it as just dried flower, well, geez, right, I got to use a ton of that, especially if I want to make, say, CO2 oil. I need quite a lot of flour to do that. And if I want CO2 oil of any amount of, strength and everything, there's only two ways to do that. Either you're going to use more of it or you're going to use stronger. And so what it's done is these silly caps that are totally arbitrary, whether you're talking about where someone's license is actually set at, where the doctors make, sort of place it, or these are totally arbitrary things too, because, I might need X amount of THC in a day to help me with my condition. You might need something completely different with your condition. I'm a 6 foot tall woman, and you're like what 1.5 foot, and so
4'9". You're good
okay. Oh well, see, that's the thing, but you probably have a higher tolerance than I do. Who knows? You might still need the same amount that I do, or you need a lot.
Well, depending. Well, because of your, you've had certain surgeries done too. You've got no absorption rate in your, so for you, even edibles, right, aren't really.
That's one of my issues is that I have, various health issues, the main one being chronic pain. I have degenerative disease and arthritis and stuff like that. And I had a gastric bypass in 2011. And so along with losing a shit ton of weight, I also lost, 80% of my absorptive surfaces of my stomach and about 60% of my small intestine. That's where you absorb anything, really, in those places. And so that affected my ability to use medibles, things like that, or not just medibles, but to take regular pharmaceuticals. They, depending on what type of drug they are, they need a different part of your, GI system to break down in. And if it's dependent on being in your stomach or in your small intestine, then I'm kind of hooped. It's like landing a plane on a short runway, it just kind of goes through me before I get the chance to absorb. And then on top of that, I have a blood disorder called ITP, which means that I have particularly low platelets all the time. So my blood doesn't clot very well. So I can't take anti-inflammatories like even Tylenol or Advil, things like that, for, really at all, but any extended period of time, because I'll just start bleeding, which is bad.
Yeah.
So I've got various reasons.
We're going to stop you right there, honey. I'm going to go to a quick break, and we'll come back and talk more about what's going on. So just give us about 5 seconds. We'll be right back, about 5 minutes, I guess. So I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, MUM, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, and the Haley Rose Foundation. We'll be right back after Grim Skunk Sensi.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
I That's the way, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the way, yeah. That's the way, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the way, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the way. That's the way. Accès possesseur, j'pogné comme un runway. Ben loin de la popo pour me l'allumer, ouais. J'ai envie de fumer, ça me fait pogner, yeah. I can't take it. No, 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 can't take it. No, 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 can't take it. No, 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 can't take it. Legalize it, yeah, man. Don't criticize it. Oh, yeah, man. Legalize it, yeah, yeah. That's the best thing that we can do. Pollution industrial, well, they don't give a damn about you say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Showing no respect. Sexy time. Yeah, dedicate this one to all the jokers and smokers of ganja. Those who believe in a free smoking Parkland. Be right, yeah, be correct, be cool, but most important, be yourself. And for now and then, welcome to the free land of the marijuana punch. Kids, kids, kids.
All right, and we are back with Lisa. We were talking a little bit before the break about some of the medical issues that she handles with her on a daily basis, and how, the absorption rates. And that's, I think, a lot of problems for a lot of patients is that they can't take conventional pharmaceutical medicine. They get to the point in their lives where they're in pain and they just can't suffer with pain clinics and, all this massage and all these other alternative pain medications, or if they can't even take pain medications, all the other alternatives that doctors honestly want to try and suggest before they will even give you medical marijuana. I made a point of letting you know on a past show that I'm due for a renewal, and my doctor signed it last year. Now this year she's decided with the renewal coming due that she's not going to sign it. I went in there with my son on yesterday, the day before Monday, and I told her I'm in a lot of pain, and if you aren't going to sign my medical marijuana papers, I need pills. She had no problem writing me out a prescription for Percocet or Flexerol, which is a muscle relaxant. So she won't sign my medical marijuana, but she had no problem writing me that triple script. And like I said, I'm not taking those pills. Let's be clear on that. I'm not jumping on the opioid train, people. I'm making a point. The point is, cannabis is safer than anything else out there. And she's willing to write me a prescription that would make me eventually become addicted to opioids. And with the opioid
well, you know what, though?
Right?
It goes the other way, too, though. There's other doctors that honestly do want to, like I in my own personal kind of struggles with Alberta Health Services and everything, believe it or not, I've had more issues, not with the doctors as much as the rest of the healthcare system, because the doctor, at least in my doctors, not all of them, but my doctors, I've been very lucky from the standpoint of having GPs and other specialists that they can't argue with the the fact that I'm missing parts of my GI system and
right.
things like that. So they've actually been, the doctors have been more on my side because my other issues, again, because I can't eat it, I have to inhale it. And if
right.
I'm inhaling it, that means that I can use topicals too, and I do use them, but they're not nearly as effective as inhaling. And so what's happened is when I tried to get other medical treatment in hospitals for whatever, I've had horrible issues. I've had ambulances turned around. I've had ambulances not even allowed to take me into any hospital in Calgary, not an urgent care or nothing, under emergency situations where I didn't even call the ambulance. Stuff like that happened where the doctors are on my side, but because the doctors, people forget doctors don't work for, I'm pretty sure it's the same in all provinces, but at least here in Alberta, the doctors don't actually work for Alberta Health Services. They don't work for the province. They're contracted out. They work for them, but they're not employees. So they're their own separate entities. So what happens is they actually don't really have a whole lot of pull. And it's sort of the equivalent of, living in a state where or a city where that's kind of backwards, and you want to go and get a legal abortion, and the hospital or the healthcare facility goes, it's not the doctors that don't want to give you the abortion, it's the administrators, right, who really don't understand the medical issues and all that sort of thing, and they just see the issue that they don't like. And so they say, you know what, no, you can't. They tell the doctors, no, she can't have one here. She has to go somewhere else. And there isn't anywhere else. It's sort of like that. They don't, because it's cannabis, they go, oh, it's marijuana, it's pot. So it's not really serious. No one could be taking this for a serious issue, right? And it's not a real thing. And of course, there must be an alternative. There's always an alternative, right? That's what these lay people say, basically, people who aren't clinicians at all. And so what happens is when you've got a kind of, as I say, a cursed unicorn like myself, who truly doesn't medically have other options, I get hooped. And it's definitely affected my health to the negative, more than whatever illness or whatever it was that would have originally brought me into these healthcare facilities to begin with. It's the cumulative effect of not getting proper health care that has affected me so severely, that to the point where I've literally been, manhandled. I've been beaten up, not manhandled in the way I normally like either, if you read my books, but beaten up and physically assaulted by quote unquote peace officers and security at hospitals in trying to attain regular services. They say, no, we just are not going to give you these services, period. I don't even get the alternative because there isn't an alternative. I once had to go and get dental work done. And then, if you get your teeth pulled, you're not supposed to be, it's not just the smoke is irritating, but if you suck on anything, you could suck the plugs out, as they say, the blood clots or whatever. And as I bleed already. And I remember after a oral surgery once at here in Calgary at Sheldon Schumer, they sent me, the doctor said, okay, yeah, bring your vaporizer. I have a volcano, plug it into the wall, da-da-da-da. That's the other thing too. Just take it outside. Well, what if you have a volcano that you can't take outside? It plugs into the wall. Anyways, they told me to go. They refused to let the doctor allow me to use this cannabis. And so I was forced to go out and smoke a bong where I couldn't even feel my face because it was frozen, but smoke a bong in the rain outside right after oral surgery. And because of that, the dentist refused to take me when I had to get other surgery done. She wouldn't take me, and she wasn't being mean. What it was is she says, I can't, Hippocratic oath and everything, I can't treat you knowing that you're going to have to go and do something that is against my treatment. And so eventually I found a really good dentist, Dr. Trey Petty, drtrey.ca. I'm totally going to give him a shout out because he has been extremely supportive, not just of me, but he always waits until he has his hands in my mouth so I can't talk. And then he goes on about how many of his patients have been helped and even saved by cannabinoid therapy, and how many of them have been able to get off of the opiates that you're talking about, Tamara, because of cannabis. So it was just a wonderful dentist, but that was just sort of a fluke, and they're very few and far between, these enlightened doctors. And part of that is because they're honestly not, allowed to learn about these things in medical school. Most doctors don't learn a lot about medicine, period, right? It's almost like a unit that you take. It's like a short, they might take a couple of classes, but that's for pharmacists in their mind. They get this giant book of drugs, and they kind of flip through that and look up to see what would be appropriate, but they don't know specific medications that well. And so, and cannabis, which is already the system is against, they really aren't given the opportunity to learn a lot about it. And up until very, very recently, especially during the Harper government, where all science was sort of suppressed, you weren't allowed to have any medical trials of these things with human beings. So because a lot of these doctors were being honest and saying, listen, I don't know enough about this to prescribe it. The other side of it, though, to be fair, though, on our side, is that you're talking about a medicine that is relatively non-toxic. I mean, it's pretty hard to screw yourself up with cannabis, unless you are a Chihuahua like mine.
Yeah, no kidding, like a Chihuahua.
Yeah, unless you're a Chihuahua, it's pretty hard to, and even then, Chong was fine afterwards, but so the idea is harm reduction, right? You start with the least harmful thing, see if that works. If that doesn't work, then you move to the next least harmful thing, right? And so you start with so the idea is why not just start people on cannabis to start with, just right from the get-go. And if it doesn't work out for them, they don't like it, it doesn't work or whatever, then move on to the next thing. Then move on to then move on to just regular anti-inflammatories. And then if that doesn't work, move on to the opiates and whatever. I've had to use opiates. The only way I can really take opiates is through an IV, and I get an extreme reaction to them. They make me extremely sick. And they can make me herniate my bypass. It's just it's a bad scene.
Right.
But after an operation, I kind of need some morphine. There isn't a lot of cushions going to help when you got your uterus yarded out or something like that.
Right.
And so, there is a place for these drugs. I just think that it's sort of upside down right now, where it's almost like you have to literally be dying or something that serious that the medical community goes, okay, now you can try cannabis.
Well, that's that's the problem. The problem is it's always the last line of defense rather than the first line of defense. Like I've got a lady here that's battling 4-stage cancer, very rare cancer. She's already gone through radiation, and I wish they would have come to me first and got on the oil regime before the radiation. So, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's never too late as far as I'm concerned. It's always a good thing to start
at with.
You know, exactly.
You know, like
exactly.
even in tandem with, but start on that and then start adding the more harmful things as the others don't work or have them at the same time. You know, at the very least, if the cannabis can't or isn't helping to acutely treat the cancer, at least the side effects of the radiation and the chemo itself, that is pretty undisputably helped by cannabis, right? So at the very least, there's that. Even if it's not the only thing that you're using, it doesn't necessarily have to be either or. I mean, like I said, if I have to use, there's some conditions I have where cannabis doesn't help it or whatever, or it doesn't help it enough on its own, and I might have to then I might have to use some pharmaceuticals. But I'll tell you, I use far less than most people normally would because I'm using the cannabis, and I can deal with the side effects of these pharmaceuticals that might be helping the main condition, but they still make you feel pretty crappy. The cannabis at least helps that, and it helps me tolerate it, so I'll stay on that medication, that pharmaceutical, even if it is one. I'll stay on it because I can tolerate the side effects of it because of the cannabis. So it doesn't have to be either or. But again, starting from the beginning, especially with children, that's an elderly. That's always where I'm always amazed that.
I think the senior citizens are actually starting to come around, right? Well, that's it. Like,
they make fentanyl lollipops, right?
Right, but like I said, seniors I think are starting to come around where they see that their bodies are breaking down. They're taking all these crappy pharmaceutical drugs because. Even when I've been up at the dispensary in Kimberley, because there are two up here, and I've been into the one, and when I was in there, that's all that was in there were elderly senior people checking it out, wanting to know more about the forms that had to be filled out, and asking questions. So, and I find that seems to be as we get older, like even for us, that, you know, as we're getting older, like, I mean, I'm going to be 48 here in a couple of weeks. And I noticed since I turned 40 that everything's slowly starting to slow me down a bit. And, you know, like, but to the point where sometimes, you know, I can't smoke enough cannabis to divert the pain, but I'm still not willing to come down, you know, to the level where I'm going to be taking pills. Like, I'm just not.
Yeah.
You know,
but then there's alternatives to that even. Then you start, you know, using things like stronger extracts like CO2 oil or like whatever it is. You know, there's other ways, and you supplement it in other ways, and there's ways of getting around that. I honestly think, though, that the seniors are a bit of a key, seniors and children, but especially seniors are kind of a key in more key in ending prohibition even than the youth, as they say, than the youth, because it takes, first of all, that's our biggest population right now, are the baby boomers, of course, are a huge population of elderly and aging people. And you go, oh, well, that's, you know, I honestly believe that doctors and the rest of society actually would look at a little old lady saying, oh, I would like to try, and oh, isn't that cute? Okay, sure, here's your weed. I think that they actually, number one, have an easier time if they actually do try to pursue this, an easier time getting to it than most. I think the average, even regular doctor would be more likely to prescribe to an older person if they actually asked. But the doctor's not going to bring it up themselves.
Not here.
Right?
Not here. I've got senior. Yeah, not here. They're just, like I said, the doctors here, seriously, Lisa, have been told by the BC College and physicians.
They're not into it,
no.
period.
But the new program with legalization coming in, the BC College and Physicians, because again, I talked to my doctor on Tuesday when I was in there, or Monday, about the whole like licensing and why she wouldn't. They had a seminar in BC here recently that they were told not to sign them anymore because with legalization coming, the only patients that are going to need medical cannabis are the ones with chronic, like cancer, chronic MS, chronic anything that's basically, you remember the first, the first, I know, but the first, lines of whatever that we were allowed to have, like, I mean, it took forever to even get Crohn's or colitis, like myself, like we had to have the B signing form, right? So originally there was the A form that only had the MS, the cancers. They're almost looking like, it almost sounds like they're looking at just going back to the original A form.
Well, to be,
what I mean?
But when you think about it, they're right from the standpoint that if it's legalized for the average adult can walk around and get an ounce or whatever, have an ounce on them, grow their flower plants or whatever, then you're right. There are going to be a lot of they're right from the standpoint they're going to be, most people are just going to go and try it. Why bother going to a doctor? You don't need a licensing to go get something that anybody can go get, right? So you don't need that. Where you do need the doctors, though, is for people who don't know how to use this as a medicine, right? This is also where the cannabinoid therapy clinics are really going to come forward and help, because you don't necessarily need a doctor to teach you how to use this properly. But at the same time, you do, if I'm somebody who's never tried this before and I'm sick and I need to know exactly how much I'm supposed to use and all that sort of thing, then you need doctor participation. And like any other medication, the doctor should be familiar enough with it,
exactly,
whoever, to be able to prescribe it. Now,
okay, I'm going to stop you again.
Does that mean
I'm going to stop you again.
You can get it?
We're going to take another quick break. Sorry.
Okay, sure.
We're already over.
Sure.
Whoa, time out. We're going to take another quick. Well, sometimes I have to tell you that, Shut up, Lisa.
I accept that.
I'm allowed to do that. Okay, so we're going to take another quick break. Again, I'm going to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, MUM, Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, the Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, and the Haley Rose Foundation. Our song is The Salads of Weed and Wine.
Hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle.
You can. Nobody keeps me in line, right, Al? All right, we're back on the air with Lisa. We were talking, I don't know, we were talking about so much stuff over the last bit because there's so much to talk about when it comes to our health and how we can actually, benefit from the uses of cannabis. And there's so many different forms of usage, the edibles, the oral, the suppositories now. There's so many different ways of ingesting cannabis for our health. So again, you were talking about, what was helping for, works for you. And how you need so much of it, and how because of your absorption rates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm kind of a curious unicorn in that one. But then the idea is that if the healthcare system can handle me at its worst, basically, if I'm like the most difficult person to medicate, whatever, then if they can't handle me, then how can they handle anybody else? Like I'm sort of a good baseline, which is the other reason why I made sure I pursued actually fighting with them. I'm always fighting somebody, but I don't do it just for fun. I'm doing it to actually get my health care for a reason, but it helps other people in the long run. And right now with that, I'll tell you, it's sort of at a stalemate right now with the Alberta government, with the Alberta Health Services. We're literally at a stalemate right now of they're not moving in their policy. We're not moving. They say they're moving, but they're not. It's just sort of and they're sort of treating me like I'm the only person in the world that ever uses marijuana, which is, again, it's acting. It's like a stigmatization. You're the only one. You're the only one we have to do this. You're special. This never comes up for anybody else. And if it only comes up for me, then they don't feel much of an onus to establish any good, programs or any methods of dealing with anything. At one point you could use cannabis you had to be in a negative pressure room, which is ridiculous. Now they took the negative pressure rooms out altogether, actually, the past year. So there was literally nowhere. And the thing was always coming up is that if I were ever put into the hospital and I couldn't go outside, what would that look like? And
well, exactly.
My liaisons with Alberta Health Services have never been able to answer that. We'll get back to you on that. And what's scary is that they're not checking with doctors and they're not checking with the medical community as to how they should handle that situation. They check with their lawyers, because really this is a liability issue for them. It's about, it's not even about legal, what's legal and what's not, because legally there's no, think about it, what kind of prescription medication are you not allowed to use in a healthcare facility under medical supervision? It's the other way around. There's some that you can only use in, like an anesthetic, can only be used in a licensed medical facility. But what kind of drug can you not, my joke is the only one I know of is equestrian therapy. It's the only one that you can't just easily use in a hospital. But so it really doesn't make sense. So it's this group delusion going on that because it's only happening to one person, then they don't really need to deal with it. And instead of looking at the medical issues, they look at the liability. So what has happened a few years back is that some nurse got upset that she had to be exposed to my evil cannabis vapor. And again, I'm using like a volcano, so it's like a pretty high end. Pretty much the highest.
Absolutely. Well, we took mine in, remember? Yeah, you were in the hospital on Medicine Hat, and you were able to use the volcano there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Exactly. Maybe it's because it's Medicine Hat. Who knows? But both of I've actually altogether spent weeks and weeks, months altogether inpatient in the hospital after my bypass and after the second surgery, and I was sick after my. Oh my gosh, it's the government of Alberta phoning me. Well, I'm ignoring them. That's the weirdest thing. Maybe they're listening. anyways, when I was in the hospital then, I had no problem using my cannabis there. I've used it in children's hospitals. I've used it, my child, again, used it from the time he was 13 inside the Calgary Board of Education public schools with their blessing. And so, in other words, my son could, and I could use it within his high school or junior high, but if we walked a few blocks away to Sheldon Schumer, to the healthcare facility, we weren't allowed to use it there. So you can use it, a child can use it amongst 2,500 other children. That's okay. But in a hospital facility under medical supervision, they're not letting you use it. It doesn't make sense. Now, what is going to change that, to kind of segue into something else, is lay people. It's a stigma, right? It's a stigma, and that's what the reason why they're willing to stomp on cannabinoid therapy patients' rights, but it's just weed, right? They're more concerned about getting sued by the nurses union or by the whatever union, and the amount of money it would cost them to fight and even be right and fight the nurses union is more than to let this one chick, if I CAC and my family goes and sues the Alberta government, even if they win, it's still way cheaper than having to fight with the union. So what happens is I'm left out there. But if we get the stigma slowly start to be erased, we're not going to be able to get around the fact that people will always associate cannabinoid therapy with just weed, like just fun weed, smoking weed, Cheech and Chong, that kind of thing. Okay, then let's come at it from the other way around, and let's look at the rights of the average cannabis consumer, not just medical people. So if we are going to legalize this and have this as something that people can use, why don't we have places to use it, right? That's been my big thing in the last while, especially is, and why I ran a lounge in Calgary successfully for a whole year. We didn't get shut down once. We had the city through, we had police through, we had everybody to fire everybody through, and they loved it because we only allowed people who are 18 and above. You did not have to have a license. We did not sell anything there. You brought your own in, but we provided a not just safe place, but a comfortable place, a fun place for adults to bring their own cannabis in and use it. You can imagine when they legalized alcohol, if they said, well, we're going to legalize this, but you can only use it in your house, in somebody's house. Well, that wouldn't have gone over very well, would it? And, you can't, this is a part of the issue there, that's happening. And it absolutely ties into medical, because if you can't get these basic things going, like these stigmas dropped, then everybody's kind of screwed. So we need to make cannabis consumption a more, again, to borrow from normalized thing, as something that isn't so weird and so special, quote unquote. That is just for, because if people think that, the only people that should be able to use cannabis are, people with seizures and cancer, and then everybody else is kind of screwed. So it's important that we start having places where people can go and use their cannabis out in a non-residential way, in a non-residential space. And so it becomes like, like the Second Cup or whatever, like a cafe. If we start seeing this on the street all the time, not just on the street, but like, in a store or whatever, then it's not a weird thing. It's not as a foreign a thing, and it's harder for society to marginalize us if it just becomes a normal thing like everything else. So you can see this happening. We've had lounges that have been around since the mid-90s, actually. But they are being screwed with, especially in Vancouver and in Ontario in particular. They're really having to fight to get the lounges to stay open. Shout out to the cannabis, what are they, CFBA, cannabis, what is the name? Oh my God, my brain is leaking out my ear. What's the bit? Abby Roach's business association that I cannot remember the name of right now. I think it's CFBA. Anyways, the point is that we need to support our non-medical people as well, and the business community who support the cannabis consuming community in these fights, because if we lose these places, then again, you have cannabis is now marginalized. Once again, it doesn't matter if you legalize it, if it becomes this thing that you have to hide away to do, it hurts everyone. This is the other reason why I think Alberta is going to be the center, as much as redneck Alberta. I actually think Alberta is going to be very much a center of the cannabis world, more and more so even than BC and Ontario, because there's a lot of libertarianism that comes with right-wing politics and sort of less government. So we already kind of have that here. Here in Calgary, we never have had any laws against smoking or vaping cannabis, period, whether it's legal cannabis or not, as opposed to Ontario and the city of Vancouver, where their smoking bylaws always have covered cannabis. They've covered everything. They just never really enforced it up until now. Pardon me? No, it's true though, but they oh, okay, yeah. Oh, she's not there no more. But yeah, it's true. It's true though that the laws in those places have always been prohibitive, and now they're just sort of cracking down. And even the municipalities are just sort of screwing with. You can see what's happening with the dispensaries in Vancouver, where they're allowing them, but they're not allowing them in certain areas, and then less areas, and they're causing them huge issues. Whereas here in Calgary, it's never been illegal, and I can't see them all of a sudden making it illegal to smoke cannabis anywhere. It's only tobacco. It's the Tobacco Reduction Act. Same in Saskatchewan is also like that, where they have the Tobacco Control Act. So what that means is that right now in Calgary, you can, any business, any place can say, sure, smoke weed right now. You can do that. And that would not be illegal. Now, if you don't have a license and you're possessing, that could be illegal, sure. But as far as the business running it, they're not doing anything illegal. So by running a lounge, and okay, hello, are you back?
Oh, sorry, I'm back. Thank you.
That's okay. You know me, I'll just keep going either way.
Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry, I was having
I'm yabbing about the lounges.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I'm yabbing about lounges, and I'm yabbing about the fact that they are under attack in Ontario and in BC and pretty much everywhere else, whereas here in Alberta, because we don't have the laws against consuming cannabis, smoking it anywhere, at least in Calgary especially, it never has been an issue, then there's absolutely no reason why lounges shouldn't be opening right now. And I think you're going to see a lot of people coming here to do that. And I hope that that's exactly what happens, because the more lounges that we have, the more places to use cannabis, the less of a weird thing it is. And because if it only is a medical thing, then it's like, oh, if that doesn't apply to me. I don't have cancer. I don't have Crohn's. I don't have But if it's something that any adult can do, and they see that you're not, that these lounges aren't having issues with people like you do have at bars and things like that, then it just makes the road easier for absolutely everyone to be able to use it. So we really do need to support those the lounges, the people who open up lounges. Dispensaries are very, very, very important. But at the same time, right now, I think we're moving into a space where supporting the consumer, period, whether or not they're medical or for whatever reason, they could be a sacramental user, whatever. Supporting the cannabis consumer is going to be such an important thing, not just the accessibility to it. Because, as important, dispensaries have always been important. As like I said, I had my own compassion club, but it doesn't really matter. We've been able to buy cannabis always, no matter where you are. There's always the 17-year-old down the street. You know what I mean? There's somewhere to buy it.
I don't think that's going to change. I really don't think that's going to change much. I
don't think that's going to change either. I don't think that's going to change either. But what does have to change though is that what good is it if it's totally legal? You can buy it all these places, but if you have nowhere to use it,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
and I think lounges are very. Yeah, you're right, and you're totally right. Like that's one aspect here that I've also pushed for is that we need a lounge somewhere, a safe consumption site. You know what I mean, for everybody, because they don't want it on the street.
Would you believe there is a safe? There is a safe consumption. Sorry, this blows my mind. This is why I have to. Even the security at AHS were like, "Oh my God!" So they just opened up what's called a safe consumption site here, and actually there's two of them. But here in Calgary, it's in this little trailer in the parking lot of Sheldon Schumer, and it is you can go there and you can whack heroin, you can that's injected, you can snort whatever you want, you can all of this stuff. And so I toddled in there with my vaporizer when I had to go to Sheldon Schumer for something. And I'm like, hey, because I even asked them, I said, I assume I can, because it says it's a safe place to use substances, illegal or not, or whatever. Right. And so I'm like, perfect. So I go over there, and they would not allow me to vaporize marijuana, because we wouldn't want the junkies to get a whiff of vaporized cannabis, would we?
What?
Did you believe that?
No, I don't.
It's even called a safe consumption site, but they will not allow me or anybody to use cannabis there. Because why?
Like that doesn't make any sense. If you're allowed to, inject your heroin or snort your cocaine or whatever else,
you can huff there. You can huff paint if you want.
You're kidding me.
But that's the thing, though, Tamara. Though, if we only concentrate on the medical, what it becomes is that you're turning people into junkies. The people who are seeking out a place. It's not just a safe consumption site.
Yeah.
No, I don't want just a safe consumption site. As a regular adult cannabis user, I want a place that's like a cafe or a bar, or I want a place that's not in a house. That it's not safety per se, it's the discretion, that I can be discreet about it, that I can have some privacy, but I can also meet other people like me, that I don't have to feel self-conscious about using it, that I have people there that know how to use it and that have the equipment there. At the lounge, we had trained dab tenders who taught people how to do dabs. It's not Vancouver, so they're not quite as savvy in Calgary as the average consumer in Toronto or Vancouver. So a lot of the people who come to the lounge had never had a dab before. So we're not just handing them a torch and here, go at it,
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing. You have to instruct, right, for people that don't have any knowledge. Like there's lots of legalization coming. They're going to have lots of people coming. Right. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, honey. It's
okay.
Our time is over, and I'd like to thank you again for coming on this show. We can always
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So
I can't wait to come back again.
Well, like I said, every Wednesday at 9:30 I have this, so we can bring you back again anytime. So again, I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, MUM, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, and the Haley Rhodes Foundation. Next week, because we're on the topic of lounges, we'll be speaking with Abby Roach. She's representing Sensible Ontario out in Ontario, which is fighting for the rights of people to be able to consume in lounges. So next week we'll talk to Abby, and you guys all have a great week. Thanks again, Lisa. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.